Hey, how do you feel about some high rarity cards, or maybe some foreign ones, or maybe be ahead of the game with others by preparing for future set releases with very quick shipping? Check out EJ Gaming and use code British5 on checkout for 5% off on all your orders. Link in the description.
Greetings duelists and welcome to another video. So today I'm gonna showcase you a deck that I've been playing for this past week or so. This was started as like an experiment to see how the dynamic of this archetype would serve well into this format, and see if my hypothesis involving how this format was concurring comes into fruition. So as always, I'm just gonna showcase you the deck first, and then I'll go with the explanations, and then probably showcase you a few things that you can do with this deck that I'm showcasing you. But yeah, um, without further ado, let's begin. So we have 3 Ogre Dance, 3 Foxy Tune, 1 Deer Note, 3 Zeamin, 1 Wagon, 1 Charakusai, 1 Madame Spider, 1 Wheel, 1 Ghost Ogre. 3 Ash, 3 Nib, 3 Veiler, 3 Fenrir, 3 Gizmek Orochi. That's a total of 29 monsters. Spell cards, 3 Teleport, 2 Desires, 3 Small World, 3 Talents, 2 Enemy Controllers, 1 Called by the Grave, 1 Jam Session. 15 spells. Three Imperms, Dangerous Gabu, Full Armored XYZ. Extra deck: XYZ Armored Torpedo, Armored Fortress, Armored Lancer. They're all part of the XYZ armor package. 1 Downard, 1 Zeus, 1 Sky Crisis. That's it for XYZs. IP, SP, Soldier of Chaos, Zeroboros. That's it for Link monsters. Jam Dragon, Bear on the Floor, Amazing Dragon, Psychic and Punisher. That's it for Synchros. And the last monster, which is a fusion monster, is Rising Carp. Okay, so explanations. As you already seen by the title, and you're seeing from the ratios and the deck, this is pure punk. The reason I reached the conclusion of playing this deck in the first place came from the Punk Testina list that I showcased earlier. The experiment that I wanted to try out is see all the different lines and all the different combos that I could do with the Punk engine if it was its own strategy. The reason I'm doing that is because Punk is a very, very good engine. I think it's a very splashable engine that can be incorporated into a lot of decks in the game. And I feel like compared to other engines that we have, they're not being seen as much play, or they're not being like showcasing themselves throughout their potential more than not. And I find that very, very interesting because, like, I'm not saying that it gives a warranty over other engines that we have in the game. For example, the Sinful Spoils engine, or like hybrids, or like other decks that we have in the game. However, I feel like the limits that you can get with the pump cards can reach very astronomical levels, and I just wanted to see how far can that potential can be at its own strategy. Another reason why I wanted to pilot this deck is because we are in a hand trap heavy format, and I feel like in a format where a lot of people are just going to be doing well with trading advantage with your opponent with a lot of hand traps, then this deck could be very, very strong and very, very ideal, because this deck is good at not just utilizing hand traps, but also accessing through your hand traps more than other decks. One example I can give you is Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Uh, there are no real archetypes in the game that can search this card with their own engine apart from this deck, and that's already really good, because even though Ghost Ogre is not like the most impactful hand trap, it is a hand trap that does what it needs to be doing this format. In this format, instead of you just blowing out your opponent with specific hand traps that just can win you the game, you want to soften your opponent's strategy and make sure they don't end on the same board they would optimize themselves getting to if they weren't getting hand trapped. Some decks are very, very resilient to hand traps and can just play through one or two specific hand traps and just end on their entire combo. However, there are some decks that just needs to utilize more of their resources in order to get there. And that is kind of much like a goal that has been seen in this format. That's why you see like a lot of people just moving away from board breakers. Another thing to note is that like board breakers are kind of mediocre this format, because you have certain decks in the game like Unchained and Rescue Ace where they can just play through their board breakers, or they can just like adapt their board and not have to worry about them. And now we're reaching full circle. Pretty much, if you saw YCS Richmond, you saw like for example Pakawat's Infernoble deck. Like that deck is extremely powerful when it goes first. However, it is very weak when it goes second. Therefore, they're playing a lot of hand traps in their strategy in order to like perfect their strategy in the off chance they don't win every die roll. Now let's talk about Punk. So, if you see here in the main deck, I have around 13 hand traps, which are the Imperms, the Veilers, the Nibs, the three Ash Blossoms, and the searchable Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. The usual hand trap ratio you're going to see in a lot of people's decks are between 11 and between 9 and 12. However, we are playing a 50 card list, and you're probably thinking, well, 13 hand traps is not enough in a 50 card deck. What other slots are you using for those? So, some people, when they don't play hand traps, they just try to play like other cards that can just serve the function as non-engine as well. That's what you have here with Kashtira Fenrir. Let me move this to the side a little bit. That's what you have with Kashtira Fenrir. That's what you have here with enemy controller and like triple tactic talents. So between Farrier talents and enemy controller, that's 8 more cards. So there are at least 21 defensive cards in this deck. 22 if you add the Cold by the Grave, which in this format specifically, I think this card actually really serves as a really good defensive card against a lot of engine of particular strategies. Like, for example, you can use this against Tear Elements, you can use this against Unchained, against the Infernoble deck. This card is also really strong. P.U.N.K is another example for a deck that you can use this card against. That's just to give you like a good amount of examples. So with a total of 22 defensive cards alongside our engine, I feel like this deck can perform optimally more than other decks can with trading card advantage. Now, another thing that you're probably thinking about is, why am I just not playing 40 with just less copies of a combination of these cards in order to just circumvent that and just be more consistent with your main engine? The outlier to that formula are these two cards right here, Pot of Desires and Gizmic Orochi. So for players who have played the P.U.N.K in the past, you're probably familiar with this card. For those who are not, basically Gizmic Orochi is a level 8 machine type monster, and it reads that you can special summon this card from your hand or graveyard as a quick effect by banishing 8 cards from the top of your deck. Meaning that this is just a recurring boss monster that can just keep summoning itself every turn. It has 2450, so it can run over Fenrir, which is something very important to note. Also, it's a monster you can use alongside Fenrir, which is one of the reasons like I thought about when it came to this deck. It can also serve as an extender, and the more important part is it is level 8. So with it, you can end up making like Amazing Dragon, Psychic and Punisher, IP and SP. So these are all good cards that you can just make with Orochi on board, and you can easily game shot your opponent if you just like start trickling advantage with their engine with the Gizmic. That's another reason you see the Zero Boros in here. There has been a game where I've had Zero Boros with 36 cards banished, and it reached 11,000 attack. So those scenarios can come up. But going back to Gizmic, in a format where everybody is trading with their defensive cards in order to like play the grind game, and it becomes like a trade between the main engine of your deck with your opponent's deck. And when you play stuff like Gizmic, it pretty much becomes like a resource battle between your engine and theirs. And if they cannot get rid of these 6 cards right here, you're just going to win the game out of like outgrinding your opponent. I've This card has won me a lot of games by itself just because I just whittled down all my opponent's resources and it became a grind game, and they just couldn't get rid of this. Another really cool thing that you can make with the Gizmic is the Star Crisis. Like, just having a monster that you can have for free to just summon the Star Crisis and use it like to punish your opponent's board is very very helpful. So that is another thing that I kind of wanted to mention. So in order for us to efficiently use Gizmic like at least 3 to 4 times in a duel, uh, the main deck cannot be 40 cards. Therefore, I just did the contingency plan of just upping my defensive card count and maxing out on the amount of starters that I can have in my deck in order to make the possible room of deck building for the Gizmic. Also, if you've seen past deck profiles I've done in the like with 50 cards, another reasoning that I have is that playing 50 makes it so you brick less with your engine requirements. Like stuff like these one of spell and traps are stuff that you really just don't want to open in your starting hand. However, like getting to them, like it could be very very beneficial. So, how many one card starters do we actually have in this deck? So, we have Zeamin, Ogre Dance, Teleport, Foxy Tune, and Small World, giving us a total of 15 one card starters. A pseudo starter would also be Shirakusai, but it does need another punk monster in order to like do its function as a starter. So essentially, we have 15, almost 16 one card starters, like in our deck. And opening Shirakusai or opening like Wagon with like another combination of these cards is really, really strong. If you've learned anything from the Scareclaw deck that I've played in the past, you know that I'm a fan of one card starters that are not redundant if you draw multiples, because what would happen is you can use the extra copies of certain cards as like functionality for your extenders. I think the correct math for like 50 cards, like seeing your starters like over 80% of the time, is 17. We're not at that benchmark just yet. However, we are extremely close, meaning that this just functions outright as that as right amount of like extenders or starters. Um, we cannot play Prosperity in this deck. The main reason for that is because one of your main combos involve like you resolving a jam session, and the other reason is you play the Armor XYZ package, and this combo, um, once it resolves, you end up drawing at least you draw 3 cards, and you end up searching these 2 traps. So essentially, it becomes like a +6. This feels very very similar to Rescue Ace, with when they try to get to Turbulence, so they can just set their entire back row instead of just setting 4. You're setting 2. However, the other 2 cards that you would have been setting could be your defensive cards that you're drawing out of your combo, because you're essentially drawing at least 3 cards. But yeah, I guess I'll explain the extra deck a little bit. I still think that any deck that can play this package should play this package. I think this package is really, really, really strong. Like, I've had a lot of duels where I just summoned this Lancer, and they just don't understand that this cannot be targeted because of the torpedo effect, and then they try to like run it over with other monsters, and they don't realize that it has like 5900 attack because of the full armor XYZ effect. IPNSP, I think that's a no-brainer. Something really, really cool about this deck is if you're facing purely, you are not going to be at the worst position, because if you can get to Psychic and Punisher, you can just beat over their noir and they can't do anything about it. If you don't get to Punisher, it means that they try to stop you with noir, meaning that like you baited out the noir, and with so many defensive cards that you have, and like cards like talents, enemy controller, and Fenrir, for example, you can just fight through like what your opponent has if like you're playing against like the purely deck, for example. So yeah, I think Punisher is really really strong. Any deck that can make this, I think this is the best deck that can make this card. And this card, yeah, I think this card's a house. I do want to play multiple Amazing Dragons. I think this card is super super phenomenal, especially with Gizmek Orochi. Like just having the ability to reborn a punk monster and just use being able to utilize it alongside the Gizmek for like other plays, or use the Gizmek itself to get to the Amazing Dragon. There is like a combo where you just have teleport and Gizmek. You teleport for Charakusai and then you special the Gizmek, and then this essentially becomes Amazing Dragon on your opponent's turn. That is a really really strong combo you can do. Zeraboros is pretty much here for Gizmek as well. I already explained that. I think this is self-explanatory. Baron self-explanatory. You're playing Fenrir in the deck, so this is your honorary level 10 that you can just summon. And this is essentially the best card in the extra deck. Like you're resolving this alongside the jam session. It gives you so many pluses, and the ability for this card to like search you a hand trap is also like a main selling point for this deck. With Xiamen SF Xiamen effect, you can make this 3300, meaning it can run over a lot of like problematic monsters, like for example, like the Kaleido Heart, for example. You can beat over Barons with this. You can beat over like other boss monsters. So, and the effect, the graveyard effect to reborn itself if they respond to a punk monster does actually come up. And if you have this alongside the jam session and you resolve that, that essentially becomes a plus, like a +2 on your opponent's turn if it ends up like resolving. I kind of want to talk about Ghost Ogre a little bit more. Uh, so I think this card is going to be a little bit future proof because with Valiant Smashers coming out in this next week, Centurion might be a sought after archetype. It's still unknown how well will it perform compared to how it's performing in the OCG. However, a lot of people are speculating really good omens behind that deck. So if it ends up being a popular matchup for you, you do have the advantage that you have a searchable card that can just trifle against their main engine. Another utility out of Ghost Ogre is like against other like miscellaneous matchups where it's kind of relevant. This card actually does well. Some riskiest players are playing Isolde, so you can use this to just kill the Isolde when they're trying to do their search effect for Rescue Ace Impulse. If they do the Sinful Spoils combo and they summon the Dark Witch, you can like kill over the Dark Witch with the Ghost Ogre, meaning that their set Snake Eye spell needs another face up card for them to keep playing the game if they want to do the combo optimally. And they're already like far behind in card advantage because the Witch needed a card for her special summon, and then what essentially happened is you're killing out the Witch, meaning they either have to commit a normal summon or they have to commit two more cards, before their before their normal summon, if they want to resolve Hydrant. So against Rescue Ace, this card is not that bad. Against Unchained, you can destroy the Unchained Soul of Rage with this card when they try to link away with Rage on your turn. So that becomes a safety net for you to combo off against your opponent if you have ways to deal with the High King DDD Wave Caesar. Um, Against Infernoble Knights, this card is exceptionally strong. I think this card is really, really good. Like, they have a lot of cards that just needs to stay up on the board in order for them to resolve their effects. For example, Noble Orange Museum, Durandal for searching a monster, Isolde is another example. Uh, some of their equip spells. So yeah, like this card is really, really good in like this format. I think it's very, very like underrated, and just having a deck that can search this card just gives it a lot of purpose. The bridges for Small World are kind of weird. However, there are efficient like cards that you can search with this, and this does get you to your entire deck in one way or another. So we're basically doing this because it gives us a total of 51 card starters, and with so many like utility cards that you can just get rid of, or like for example hand traps that you don't need for specific matchups, for example, or like other non-engine cards, you can just trade them away with the Small World and just get to your starters that way. Also, this becomes two banishes for Zeroboros effect. I mean, at least it's like 400 more attack for Zeroboros rather, so that can come up like in another venture. One more thing I should mention about Ghost Ogre is that going second against established boards, this card is also really good because it can just outright just destroy monsters your opponent has that try to contest against you. And with Emergency Teleport, you essentially have more copies of Ghost Ogre. So if you're trying to pick apart your opponent's board, one thing you can do is you can just summon Ghost Ogre with Teleport, and that's just like another thing you can do against your opponent. So now that you saw all of this, I'm going to like sort this a little bit, and I'm gonna show you like I guess one card combo or a Soto combo that you can do in this deck that I think like is very, very beneficial, and like you'll pretty much understand where I'm coming with this. So let's sort these out a little bit. All right. Um, there are. I'm going to showcase you. I guess it's a 1.5 card combo because you do need an extra card in your hand. But we're going to do Xiaomin, and let us just grab us. Let's just grab this copy of Small World for as an example of a card you can use. So essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to normal Xiaomin, you're going to pay 800, and you're going to search for Foxy Tune. Since you already exhausted your normal summon, you're going to be using Foxy Tune's effect, sending this to the graveyard, and that's going to summon us Charakusai. Then what you're going to end up doing is you're going to pay for Charakusai's effect. These two are in the graveyard, and essentially it becomes Rising Carp. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to tribute the Rising Carp, and with Rising Carp you're going to end up summoning the Deer Note in defense position, as well as, let's see if we can find it, P.U.N.K Wagon. So these two are on the board. You're going to use Wagon's effect, and you're going to be searching the jam session. And if you've seen the Tistina combo that I've done in the past, you're pretty much like getting an idea where I'm going with this. This is going to be something very, very similar. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to activate the jam session. We're going to grab this dice just to indicate the times that we've used it. And you're going to synchro these two into Jam Dragon Drive. So you're going to do Jam's effect, and with Jam, you're going to be searching for Madame Spider. And you're going to be doing Deer Note as chaining 2. And with Deer Note, you're going to special the Charkusai. Now you're going to activate the jam session, and the jam session will net us 1 draw. We'll just use this guessmark as an example. So you're essentially going, you're trading, you're gaining back the card advantage that you wasted in the turn. Depending on what your hand is, you can switch up the cards that you are going to search with the Jam Dragon Drive. The number 1 priority would be Madame Spider, because the way it will work is you're going to use the jam session effect to like special the Madame Spider, banishing like a P.U.N.K in your graveyard. It could be anyone. I usually banish Xiaomin or Foxytune just because they're expendable. You're playing 3 of each, and then what you end up doing is you're paying for Madame Spider's effect that will search us for the Gabu, and it nets us another draw. In the off chance that you already have Gabu in your hand and you no longer need that Madame Spider, then another searchable option would be the Second Wheeler. In the off chance that you already have extenders for you to summon another level 3 on board, one card that I usually search for is the Ghost Ogre. Sometimes there are scenarios where I just don't grab other extenders, or there will be scenarios where you've already used the jam session in order to summon another monster and just switch the sequence of the P.U.N.K cards. And in that instance, then that's where the Wheeler comes from, as well as the Ghost Ogre. So these are other options that you can search with Jam Dragon Drive, but it just really depends on what you're trying to do with it. But essentially, you have 2 draws, you have the Gabu. Again, if you've seen the Tistina combo, you already know where I'm going with this. But essentially, you go for XYZ Armor Torpedo, you detach, you have a 3rd draw, you go into Armor Fortress detaches, you're going to search for the full armor XYZ, and that's essentially like the combo itself. And so it's pretty, you have 5 new cards, and out of those 5 new cards, 2 are trap cards, so you have a guaranteed defensive card in here. And if you already had access to it, you can just use Ghost Ogre as your searchable defensive card for this. I forgot to put the second counter on the jam session. Other things you can do is, instead of just going for the full armor XYZ stuff, you can keep Charkusai. You can use this, synchro your opponent's turn, summon like Amazing Dragon, If your opponent tries to respond to Amazing Dragon, you can bring back the Gem Dragon drive, and then you can activate the Gem Dragon drive, use that to search for like the Ghost Ogre, and then the Jam Session will trigger, and then you have another draw like on your opponent's turn, and that essentially becomes like a +3. So that's pretty much the conclusion with this deck. I think I have explained quite a bit. If you're interested in more theory and more talking about P.U.N.K cards, I can definitely do that. I will be linking a few channels in the descriptions. There are like people who are probably way more knowledgeable than I am with the P.U.N.K deck. So if you want to learn from them rather than me, one example I will give you is like Toon World. They have a lot of like deck and strategies that involve like the P.U.N.K cards in general. But yeah, like I think this is a really really good deck. I think this is uh, it's super budget as well. Like the cards are not really worth that much. Like if you take away like the defensive cards, for example, and obviously stuff like SP, Little Knight. Like if you don't count those, then this deck is fairly budget. I think in a format that we have right now, like if your deck can do well trading with non-engine and can just search like your hand traps and your defensive cards very optimally, I think this deck could be a deck for you. Uh, I mainly built this deck as a foundation to see how far I can do well with the P.U.N.K cards before I keep experimenting them as hybrid for other strategies. However, this was a lot of fun. I've actually been liking this deck a lot. It does very well against certain matchups as well. Like if you're very knowledgeable this format and you know what decks you like want to prepare for, then I think this deck could be for you. I know this was a very long video. I know there was a lot of explanations, a little bit of rambling, but I just kind of wanted to like talk about everything I know when it comes to this deck. Will I keep playing this deck? Most likely, yes. I think out of every deck that I've played this format, this is one of the decks I had the most fun with. The other one being the Unchained Labyrinth like deck. I'll probably play more with the Tistina version later on. I just want to find like a build that suits me very very well. Uh, I could try other strategies with P.U.N.K in the future. Like for example, I do own like pretty much all the zombie cards. So if you want to see something like that, I could try it out. I could try other hybrids like with the adventure cards. I could try with like other decks. So yeah, I hope you found this informative. I hope you found this to your understanding, to your liking. Um, More videos coming soon, most likely.